to the Power of One, and we are doing the part two of victimizations at the border with Rosie. Rosie, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. I'm glad to be here with you.
So you ended the first session going right into the second when you're speaking about how to serve those who have language barriers. But let's talk about some of the actual victimizations that take place at the border. We did speak about human trafficking with the cartel. What about domestic violence? Does that happen at the border? Murders, does that happen at the border? And how is that handled?
So everything and any type of crime that you can think of, with the increasing population, it's going to happen, and this happens in the big cities as well. The more people that we have from different, uh, backgrounds, personalities, cultures, it's going to create conflict and it's going to create instability. And we've seen a huge increase in our population in this county, and then also an increase in crime. um, we've always had an issue with family violence. I need to make that clear. Like, that's not something new. I think family violence in our area has been one of the biggest crimes that we fight daily. We average about 8,000 family violence cases being reported to law enforcement every year. And we know that statistically, that's only 30% because family violence victims don't want to report. And now what we're seeing with family violence, and these are women and children that live in the border. They're already in the border, they're residing there. And, the abusers are undocumented as well. So we have family violence where the abuser is undocumented and family violence where the abuser is a US citizen. Because we've seen where young women are, or women are coming into our border, they're marrying to local people, US citizens, and then they get, in situations of intimate partner abuse or violence. And so unfortunately, for undocumented family violence victims, there's a lot of barriers for them to seek assistance. One is the immigration status, right? Immigration has always been used as a form of control and abuse and threat on women. That's been something that I have dealt with for 25 years with undocumented victims of family violence. I've had stories where they'll tell me that they literally drive them to the border, to the bridge, and tell them, if you call the cops or if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to cross you back to Mexico so that you can, go back home. Or I've had stories where they try and cross them through the checkpoint because, for the viewers that don't know, we're trapped in a 100-mile radius in the border. Like, there's no movement past that checkpoint unless you're a US citizen or a permanent resident. You cannot cross that checkpoint unless you're able to because of your immigration status. So for women that are stuck here in the border in intimate partner violence situations, they cannot flee that area because there is no way they can cross the checkpoint. Right. So that's a huge tool that is used as threat and intimidation from abusers. And I've had a couple of cases where the abuser will cross the checkpoint with them just to get them deported. And another common tactic is threatening to call immigration on them. I'm going to get you deported. I'm calling ICE. You're going to get deported. And so those women are in fear of calling police for help. So they get stuck in those family violence situations. And they don't know their rights because they're coming from other countries where maybe there's no women's rights, because we know there's a lot of countries where the women are not protected and there's a lot of gender-based violence. So they're fleeing from countries where they don't understand that here in the United States, there are laws that protect you if you're a family violence victim. As a matter of fact, family violence victims can ask for special visas to get their immigration status if they are victims of family violence or sexual assault. So we have U visas that are granted to victims that are living or married to a non-documented person in the US and they're being victimized either physically or sexually. They can apply for a U visa as long as they cooperate with law enforcement and with prosecution. They get certified, they can apply for their U visa and hopefully get immigration status so that they can remain here in the United States lawfully and have a work permit and be able to work and sustain themselves. And then for women that are married or living with a U.S. citizen or a resident alien, they can apply for VAWA, which is the Violence Against Women Act. And VAWA is a self petition, meaning that they don't need no one to petition them. They can petition themselves as victims of family violence. The caveat to that one is that they have to be living or married to a U.S. citizen or somebody with permanent residency. And so there are laws, federal, and these are federal congressional acts that were passed more than 30 years ago, Melanie. This is not something new. Like women and children that have been victims of family violence or sexual abuse have always been protected here in the US with disregard to their immigration status or what country they're coming from. The problem that we see is that they don't know that. And so then they suffer in silence and in fear because they don't know that they're able to get that and that they're able to press charges. And as a matter of fact, even here in Texas, we have the crime victims' right,
Mhm.
that protects us. It doesn't matter where you're from, as long as you reside in the state of Texas, you have victims' rights. And these are constitutional rights that were granted from our state, from the Texas Constitution. And so there's a lot of laws that protect victims of crime. It's just, I guess, the lack of information and the lack of knowledge. And in particular with family violence, we know that one of the biggest tactic abusers use is isolation. So they'll isolate their victims so that they don't get this information, right? So how do we reach those victims that are isolated, trapped in those intimate partner relationships so that they understand that there's help and that they can get out of those situations safely, that there's domestic violence shelters all over the US that can shelter them 24/7, they never close. That we have 24-hour hotlines that answer calls for help, that if they're injured, they can come to the hospital and they're entitled to get a forensic exam and medical treatment, that they can apply for crime victims compensation because every state has a crime victims compensation fund, and then they don't require you to have a social for that. Even if you're undocumented, you're able to apply for those benefits. So we do a lot of prevention and outreach in our communities, especially in like the rural areas, in the colonias where we know that if this information doesn't circulate frequently. We target a lot of the communities that are Spanish speaking, to have culturally sensitive information put out there, and just encourage people to call and ask for help and not be in fear. But unfortunately, with all this immigration crackdown and everything that's happening with the ICE, removals and deportations, they're scared, and it's understandable. Like we would be
Right.
scared too, right? Like
Exactly.
we
Exactly.
have to be truthful about this situation. If you're in an intimate partner relationship and people are abusing you physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually, you're not going to do anything to create more abuse, right?
Mhm.
It's not, that's not how our mind works. Trauma and fear will paralyze you. And
Exactly.
so I hear a lot of people always, I mean, it's been the past 25 years is like they stay there because they want to. Why doesn't she just leave? It's not
Mhm.
easy. It's not
Exactly.
easy to leave. And as a matter of fact, every time that I speak about family violence, I say this: leaving an abusive relationship does not equal safety.
Mhm.
Okay?
Mhm.
And that's even for us as US citizens and professional women, educated women. I can tell you by lived experience in this profession for 25 years that I have had victims that have PhDs,
Mhm.
that have
Mhm.
masters, that are married to influential people, that are very well off economically, that you name it. It does not
Mhm.
discriminate against your gender, your socioeconomic level, your education. You can become a victim of family violence and not know what to do.
Exactly. And that's why I always say you never pass judgment because you don't know what you're going to do in that situation. But like you said, safety is key and it matters.
Yeah.
I can imagine that the police department, I don't know how it's run in Texas. You know, Philly, we have so many police departments all throughout the county and then many hospitals. But I don't know how that is in Texas if there's so much crime at the border. How does that work with law enforcement and then with the hospitals?
So I don't want to say that there's a lot of crime. The crime index is based on the population we have, right? So as population grows, crime increases. But we do have 28 law enforcement agencies in our county. 28. Okay, so it's a vast area, rural area mostly. We only have one big city, which is McAllen, and that's our biggest police department. And then the Hidalgo County Sheriff's Office, which is the county, and they patrol most of the rural areas. So they're the largest law enforcement agency compared to the other 28. Plus, we also have state police departments, we have federal police departments, we have the military, we have the National Guard. So our area is very much law enforcement, militarized presence at all times.
Mm,
You know, we have even other states patrolling the border. We have the Florida State Patrol. People are coming from all over the U.S. to help law enforcement to help patrol and control the border crime, because the local PDs have to control the community crime. You know,
mhm,
our
mhm.
regular calls that come in every day. So the border is section to, I want to say maybe uh, 10 miles from the bridge to coming into the county. You're going to have a lot of federal, state, military, local law enforcement presence. And then inside the communities, we have all the police departments that are working to disrupt crime in the community itself. But the district attorney's office where I work, because I used to be the director for the victims unit there in the Hidalgo County Criminal District Attorneys for 10 years. And my unit was fairly large because we had a large area to serve. So I had 21 victim advocates in my unit that
Mm,
would serve victims of crime. And we had 12 felony district courts, 10 county court at laws, and a whole bunch of specialty courts. So it was a very, very large district attorney's office. So we had huge caseload. When I left, we had 142 homicides on docket that we were prosecuting. 142 homicides.
was
And
that just
those
at
were,
the border?
excuse me,
Was that just at the border?
that was just Hidalgo County, just our county. Our
Mm,
county had 142 homicides that were being prosecuted.
okay.
And they range from different things from, cartel violence, gang violence, family violence, a lot of even, DWI fatality. So, you know, similar to other counties, how they prosecute homicides.
Mhm,
But it was a very big operation of serving, victims of crime, because we had so many cases in different types of cases, from aggravated kidnapping to aggravated robbery, family violence, sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, human trafficking. We got everything there. Everything was coming in through our office. And so aside from that, we were also getting all the people that were getting arrested for immigration violations, for like
mhm,
illegal entries, illegal reentries. So our jail got overpopulated because we were housing our own, people that were committing crime in the community, plus all the people that were being brought in by ICE, by the Texas Department of Protective Services, which is State Patrol. So we started to have to house defendants in 3 different counties and pay them to house them for us, and then transport them to come to court whenever they needed to come to court. So that created a huge uh, issue with us, income wise in the county because we were having to pay for all this stuff. And the county has to, like, what are we going to do? We have to house people that are getting arrested. If
Right.
they can't bond out, we have to keep them somewhere. So, we were getting like a lot of people that were being sent to us for immigration violations. So then our governor, he started using some of the state prisons to house those persons that were being held for immigration violations until the feds picked them up, and then they were going to go to federal court because immigration violations is federal law. We don't prosecute federal law. We prosecute state law. So we were housing them, but we couldn't take them to court. We couldn't sentence them. We couldn't then we had to wait until ICE picked them up and then got them to go to the federal courthouse where they were going to get sentenced. And once they got sentenced, then they were sent to federal prisons to serve the time. But in the meantime, until they're proven guilty, they have to remain in custody in the county jail until they're taken by ICE. So it's it's a it's a complicated system. People don't understand that. And they say, well, arrest everyone, detain everyone, but it creates issues with where do we keep them, right? So we just built a brand new jail. Now we have 3 detention centers in our area to be able to keep up with the housing of persons that are being arrested.
Mm. And does your agency provide court accompaniment with those who are victimized at the border?
Yes. So uh, through the district attorney's office, I created that victims unit in 2015. And that's the primary purpose is to provide court accompaniment and services for prosecution when victims are going to court if their case is being prosecuted. But there's other community-based organizations that provide services as well. So they'll provide legal services, they'll provide shelter, crisis services, rental assistance, clothing. So we have like different organizations that all form together to be able to serve this population of victims, especially family violence, because that's the biggest one that we see in our
Mm.
region. So we have a huge family violence task force with over like 60 organizations that provide different assistance to victims in our region.
Over the years, or can you give us like a little snapshot? When did you see that more people begin to come to the border? And is it like record breaking for 2024, 2025?
Well, actually, no, there hasn't been like, oh my God, there's so many people coming. The thing is that they televised it
Mm,
and they're all the time for us local people, right? We knew that this was happening, but nobody was paying attention to the border. It
mm,
wasn't until Trump got elected the first year that this exploded in the news.
okay.
But it had been happening since the Clinton administration. And
Mm,
I'm sure that there's statistics in the Office of Refugee and Resettlement of how many people have come in since then, how many people they have assisted as refugees since this office was created, since the Office of Refugee and Resettlement was created. But yeah, we did. There was a couple of points in different administrations, not just Trump. We got it through when Bush was president, and then when Obama was president, and then Trump, and then Biden. Like we've had surges of migration fluctuate depending on what's happening in the world. So
mm.
different things trigger that, instability, war, famine, natural disasters. So it all depends what's happening in the world. That's when we'll get the those surges of a lot of people coming in seeking asylum. But for the most part, every border town deals with migration situations because we are an international border crossing area, so that comes with that territory. But it got major attention the first time that Trump got elected, and it just exploded in the news, and it was politicized.
Mm.
But we had already been working with the refugees and the migrants that were crossing the border for years, trying to get them settled and trying to get them assistance and help.
Rosie, I want to thank you for everything that you are doing. And again, it's important for everyone to understand you cannot judge and you cannot pass judgment on someone because you do not know what they are going through. But I want to thank you for everything that you do to help those in need. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you so much for joining me today. There are so many people who are doing amazing work that you don't see every day. They work behind the scenes to help those in need. Remember, the power of one starts with you. Peace and love.